we'll go ahead and get started. This is Sam Lawrence with Findorff, giving, as I said before, the Precon Operations Masterclass. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. First thing I got to do is take a picture of this because my kids will never believe that I'm a rock star. All right. Well, thank you for having me. Please keep eating, enjoy yourself. When Alex called me and asked me to present on Preconstruction Masterclass, Operations Masterclass, I thought, okay, why me? Am I just the oldest guy that they know, and he must know something? What I'd like to do today is just start a conversation. I've got several questions that I'm going to sprinkle throughout so that we can kind of talk about it. Also, find out what's going on with the people at your table and have a conversation with them. But pre-construction was a pretty new idea, at least in southern Wisconsin it was. The first thing that we had to work on was kind of breaking the template that what the architects of the world were thinking about how a contractor could contribute early on was, well, that's the estimator. I'll call him when the SDs are done and he'll do an estimate for me. So we had to break through that barrier and get them to understand, no, we are a really valuable partner in this process. We can help you keep the job on track, keep the project on budget by being at the table during the process, giving feedback constantly that says, unfortunately, all too often, that's not in the budget. But it is important feedback. And so through the course of my time, we have added database estimating. So when I started, it was all actually in Lotus 1, 2, 3, which really ages me. Then we added to, we were Sage Timberline, we added that, and we're users of that for 20 years. Was actually here in Dallas 3 years ago advancing pre-construction and started to see what was going on in the industry and got introduced to the idea of integrated 2D and 3D takeoff built right into the estimating software. And I came back from that and approached our executive team and said that we need to change. We need to get there. Sage is not doing that. We need to move forward. So we went through a pretty in-depth analysis of kind of what was going on in the industry and are really happy that we joined the Destiny team. But anyhow, so we've gone through the implementation of database estimating. When I started in conceptual estimating, we were kind of just organizing things however it made sense to us. We adopted Uniformat as our standard for that. We've gone from takeoff tools of a ruler and a scale and highlighters to digitizer work. We adopted on-center, on-screen takeoff. Actually, and that's part of thinking about innovation. We've heard a lot about innovation this morning. Constantly monitoring that is an important thing to do in our industry because it's changing all the time. And that's part of why I'm telling you my journey is to tell you where it's been in the last 25 years. And as I sat here this morning and I listened to Johnny talk about AI, to listen to Brent talk about model-based estimating, that's where it's going. I mean, so for what's going to happen in the next 25 years, I'm really curious in 5 years if you come and you're sitting down and you're thinking about, okay, now we're all doing model-based estimating, what's next? Fascinating. Lots of opportunity for what we do in pre-construction, what we do in construction, and how we affect it. And I totally agree with what Stuart said this morning. This is really the fun part of pre-construction. It's what I love doing because it is where you really make the big impact. It's really, really important what we do. And so constantly looking at how we do what we do is critical to the success and the growth of your company. I want to just briefly hit on how we're organized. So 19 years ago, there were two of us. There was this chief estimator and me, and now we've grown that to a team of 19 men and women that are focused entirely on pre-construction. And I think actually compared to some of our peers, that's relatively lean. And I'll talk about that in a second. But you can see the variety of different positions that we have within Findorff. Got another poll question here, if you could pull that up. I actually have a couple. So the first one is, do you compete in the hard bid market? I'm curious about that. Well, while that comes up, I will talk what we do. So at Findorff, about 10 to 20% of our revenue every year comes from pure general contracting hard bid. Like I said, we're based in Madison, Wisconsin, so the University of Wisconsin is based there. There, the question is up. And so there's a fair amount of UW work and state work that are required. We're also the capital of Wisconsin. So they're required to bid their work. So it's one way we get into the higher ed world. And so we do a fair amount, about 10, like I said, 10 to 20%. But we also, on our CM side, are often allowed by contract to bid to ourselves for our work. And so we bid as a subcontractor, as concrete and mason and carpentry drywall crews. And so we do get a fairly large portion of income from that bidding. There we go. Everybody does. Huh? I can't see how many that is, but okay. Good. Well, if you are doing hard bid and you are self-performing, you should definitely be looking at assemblies, because that's really for us. Assemblies are just really where you get really good information, and it's also, as was said earlier today, that it really helps the less experienced people in your team make sure that they're not missing a bunch of stuff, because it walks them through the whole process. So the next poll question is, do you differentiate between, do you have an estimating department and you have a pre-construction department, or is it all one? And I'll tell you, at Findorff, we're all one. And I've talked to some others where they do separate it, where at least in their organization, pre-construction actually answers to business development, and estimating answers to operations or project management. I've never quite understood that. So if you are set up like that, come and talk to me, because I'm asked that question of from our executives relatively consistently. And what I think they think it is pre-construction is the conceptual side of it, and estimating is the plan and spec side of it. But with a group the size that we are, to be lean and mean, I've got to be cross-trained. I've got to have people that can do both when the need arises. So what have I learned in all this time? First, it boils down to 5 simple words. It's the people, stupid. It is all about your team. That is the most important tool you have, most important asset you have. 2 ways of doing it, right? One is go out and hire them. Good luck, right? But the second one is taking people, growing them, building them. And one way we do it at Findorff is when we hire young people right out of college and they're project engineers, we take them on a rotation that will last them probably 2 to 3 years. So they spend time, hopefully, working with a superintendent, like out in the field, best place in the world to learn how a building gets built. If you haven't been born into construction and you fell in love with construction in college or something, you need to figure out how a building goes together. You need to understand what different forming systems are. You need to understand what all goes into building a masonry wall. And there's no better place than out on the job site. And you can't be an effective estimator, especially grow yourself into a conceptual estimator, if you don't learn that stuff. So get them out in the field. Then we put them in project management, and we let them shadow, usually on a big job, shadow project manager, take a portion of the work, and really figure out what goes into the, building a good schedule, what goes into managing the dollars and cents, what goes into working with owners and architects and managing that process. So expose them to that. But then we bring them into pre-construction, and we make them spend a year, I shouldn't say that. We let them spend a year to a year and a half in pre-con learning those tools. Because it's really important for their growth long term. Everybody's got to do estimating this in project management. They're going to have change orders. They're going to have to give that thought process about what all goes. It's not just about, having that, okay, they added a bookshelf. Well, they added the bookshelf, but I don't have blocking in the wall, so I got to tear the wall apart. I've got to get it from the loading dock up here, and now the floors are all finished. And, you got to think through it. And that's the critical thinking that we start to grow in them in pre-construction earlier in their career. We had one peer group partner that said they called that estimator sympathy training. There is the benefit of that they get it, that it is estimating, not exactimating, and have a little bit of sympathy for you when they get further along in their career. But the best part, the goal that we're really after is for those people that really click, let's get them back after they've spent a few years learning the rest of the business, and let's bring them back into pre-construction. And about less than half, maybe a third of our team has been through that process. And so we continue, every time I get a new pre-con or project engineer in, I'm kind of monitoring, are they fit for pre-construction long-term, and how can I make sure I attract them to it later on? Invest in your people, and that's in giving them training, but more importantly, giving them your time and mentoring them. And not just you, but everybody on the team has a responsibility to invest in the people that they work with. Identify what their strengths are and capitalize on them. Use them to train other people. Use them when you have somebody that's really good at concrete, you got a complicated concrete job, get them on that, obviously. But the training thing's probably even more important. The harder one is when they have weaknesses. Identify those weaknesses and bolster them. Make them, figure out ways to improve those. But then, finally, probably the most important part is supporting them. You need to have their back. You need to know what has been going on when they're doing their work, so that you've got the opportunity to help them make good decisions, to help them present well. So your job is as whether you're their manager or you're their senior working with somebody with less experience, you need to be doing what you can so that you can support them in what they do. And then the final piece is, and this one's been hard for me to communicate to people. Often they're worried about their peers, and they're thinking, okay, Joe's been at this as long as I have, and he just got promoted, and I haven't been promoted yet. And it clicked with me finally that what you really need to focus on is you need to find your replacement, and you need to train your replacement. And then you're not pulling yourself ahead in your career, you're being pushed from the guy you just helped learn more. And when you get that switch flipped, all of a sudden you see people's attitude totally changing. I don't need to worry about the guy that just got the promotion. I need to worry about the younger team member and train them and help them. And all of a sudden they get energized in doing that because there's a benefit to them. Oops, sorry, missed a button there. So here we are, technology's your friend. And it certainly is. But the other piece of that really is change is inevitable, right? It's gonna happen. I've just been talking about what's happened during my career, what's gonna happen in the next 25 years. Technology is either gonna be the cause of the change or the solution to the change. So you've always gotta be looking at what is the next technology and how are we gonna capitalize on that. Like a friendship, takes time, right? I just said, we spent a year. Those 19 people, almost every one of them was involved in helping us get Timberline up, or I'm sorry, Destiny up and running. At Findorff, we've always believed in being part of the leading edge, not the bleeding edge. We do test innovation all the time. One example was probably 3 or 4 years ago. I don't know if any of you have seen the semi-automated mason, the SAM robot. We saw it and we said, you know what? We've got an aging workforce, right? We've got fewer people entering the trades all the time. Automation is really something we've got to think about, if not embrace. So we went out and we saw it. We said, okay, this is worth looking at. We actually rented it on a couple of different projects. And the response at the time was it's not quite ready. It be applicable to certain projects, might be really useful if you were doing a prison and you just had miles and miles of straight wall. But when you're getting on a job that has a lot of windows with returns and corners and things, it wasn't giving you the boost that we were hoping for. But it's technology, right? So it's changing all the time. So when is it going to get to the point where, yeah, we're really going to invest in it? We're keeping our eye on that. I remember the first time I looked at on-center, on-screen takeoff was really earlier in their deployment. It just wasn't ready for prime time, but we kept our eye on it for a while, and once it got to be the effective tool that it is today, that's when we dove in. So that's the difference between, for me, the bleeding edge and the leading edge, is get involved, make sure you know what's out there, but find the right time, and that's probably the challenge to all of it. Make sure they want to be your friend. This one was a little bit, maybe a bit of a stretch, but I got a phone call a couple weeks ago from a guy that was trying to sell some estimating software. And I said, no, you know, we've invested quite a bit of time getting up and running with Destiny, and we like where we're at. We're really happy. And he said, what do you mean you spent a lot of time? How long did it take you? And I told him, I said it was about a year. And he said, well, I could have you up and running in 2 weeks. So I almost hung up the phone. And then but I drilled him a little bit, and I said, you know, okay, tell me how this works. And essentially what he was saying is, I've got a prepackaged estimating tool, and as long as you're willing to change the way you do things to the way I have my software written, we're good to go. Well, I've been doing this business the Findorff way for a long, long time, and we've got cost history. We've got productivity history that's all based on the way that we do work. We've got 800 men and women in the field that are used to coding their time a certain way, and we can retrieve that information and be really accurate. And you want me to change that? So just like a friend, I don't want to change to be a friend. Now I'm willing to adapt. We've adapted some things by implementing Destiny. We changed our accounting software to CMIC about 7 or 8 years ago, and we had to make some changes, but not major ones. We didn't totally change who we were. We adapted, and I think that's really the corollary I'm trying to make here. And then network. That was part of the integration that we've been talking about this morning. You know, look at all the tools that you have, and how can we integrate them? You know, like I said, we've been using on-screen for quite a while. We've had a BIM team for 15 years. We're not to the point, sorry, Brent, where we're using that for model-based estimating. We have been Assemble users for quite a while, and we're at the point, you know, we're confirming quantities, which is really, it really helps. I've always liked the idea of do things from several different angles, and if you're coming on the same answer, you're probably pretty close. And Assemble's been really helpful for that. But one of the questions I have asked, and I think, Brent, you answered it for us, is should I be teaching my BIM guys how to be estimators, or should I teach my estimators how to run Revit? And I just heard you're doing that, and you're nodding your head. So we need to look at that. That's the innovation that we need to start implementing at Findorff. I got a few more poll questions here, if you would switch back over. And the first one will be, where are you in your technology journey? How many people have BIM and VDC on staff? How about a raise of hands? How many have BIM, VDC on staff? Okay, better than half, it looks, maybe. Okay. I think I mentioned it before, but we have been doing it for 15 years. We got 10 men and women in 2 of our offices combined. They are, for the most part, doing MEP coordination, clash detection, work a lot with our BD team. We've got, guy that pilots the drones and laser scanners and all that kind of stuff. But for the most part, the integration with pre-construction has been, hey, we got a model, can you convert it into assemble so we can get going? And 15 seconds later, we get that response. Next one, how many of you are using BIM in some way, whether fully integrated or just, like I said, like us using it with assemble? How many are getting quantities? Okay, not quite as many. That makes sense. Okay, so how about who's using the integrated 2D takeoff that's built into Destiny Estimator? Okay, smattering. Not many. And that's where we fall. We're playing around with it. I've talked to quite a few of the Beck Tech team last night. For us, it's really, I think most of us are really busy right now. There's just so much work going on that I don't want to lose productivity, so I'm not going to learn the new tool. There are new muscle memory that you got to build, and it's just, now's not the time. I have done it on some small projects, and I definitely see the benefit of it, but it's going to take a little while, and some training and some, some forcing, I think, is going to have to happen at some point. And then finally, and I bet this won't be many, how many are using the BIM integration, 3D integration that's built into, we got one, Tamor, okay. Oh, we got a few over here too, great. So, who do I need on my team? This is something that, we didn't have it day one. We actually don't have it all now. But, given some thought to, if you're building your pre-con group, or maybe some of these will be new ideas to you. This one won't be. Conceptual estimators, and I think most of the people earlier raised their hand when asked if they did conceptual estimating. It is the lifeblood of what we do. If you want to negotiate work, you got to be good at it. If you're self-performing, in particular, plan and spec kind of work, you definitely need the people that like to do that detailed work, just really get in there. It is, though, more than quantities. That's the one thing that's sometimes hard to instill in the, as you're introducing somebody into pre-construction. Is that a 15,000 square foot slab or structural slab? Or is that 10,000 square feet that are, 11 feet in the air, and then there's 5,000 square feet that are over a 35-foot tall atrium? And recognizing that, because that doesn't show up on the plan, right? You have to think about that. And so that's even, having that ability, training people to think that way for really good plan and spec people, that's important. Now on to some things that are a little bit more subtle. A code geek. You don't have to have somebody that does this, but it's really helpful, especially early on. Somebody that they don't have to know the code in and out, but they can walk through. I can't tell you how often we're sitting in a pricing meeting and somebody says, does steel need to be fireproofed? Let me go grab my code book. And you start looking through, okay, it's what type of building is it? What construction type is it? How many stories, how many square foot are allowed? What is this? And you can make a statement and say, okay, it doesn't need to be fireproofed. So you put a line in the estimate that says fireproof excluded. And now you've got a record of that when you're sitting down and you face the architect and you say, okay, this is what I assumed, am I correct? And so that gives you credibility. The other thing is Wisconsin has actually taken a fair amount of the IBC and changed it or modified it in some way. And so when you're working with an architect that's out of town, to be able to say, hey, Chapter 17 doesn't apply in Wisconsin, that's really effective and helpful to your team as well. An economist. Not not an uncommon question at all to say, hey, you guys built a building for us 8 years ago. And we're thinking about building another one, bing, bing, bing. I need to stay in touch with you. But then the second thing is they're going to say, okay, if we get going on this next year, how much do you think our building that you built for us in the past is going to cost? A lot of people just go and grab the means book and look it up. Well, at Findorff, we monitor several indices and have built it into a simple little spreadsheet where I can say, okay, it was built in 2019 and it was $275 a square foot, and I average the indices and I project it forward and I print it out on a nice sheet that says Findorff on top of it. And now they really feel like, okay, these guys are thinking about it. They're giving me real data. They're not just saying, well, 3% a year at 8 years is whatever. And so that has been really helpful. Now, in particular, with what's going on in the industry, you need to be looking at what's going on. What's the next thing that's going to screw this up? I mean, we had COVID struck, and then it got really cold down here for a few weeks, and all the petroleum products got screwed up. We had a ship in the Suez Canal. I mean, there's so many things that have gone wacky. And having people on your team that are thinking about, okay, when the war in Ukraine starts, what's that going to do to the cost of construction? We're getting ready to do a project in Orlando, Florida. What's the price of plywood going to be in about 6 months? It's thinking about that kind of thing. This is one where we're running short. Historian. Yeah, we're all interested in cost history. We don't have enough work that we've put into Destiny yet to be able to use the tools to do some parametric work with Destiny Estimator. But we are working on that, and part of that is figuring out who that is. And obviously, these don't all have to be like individual people. You could have one person that loves all this stuff, but you should be looking to bolster that experience. Next one is strategic thinkers, and this is one that I find we have strategic, don't get me wrong, we have strategic thinkers within our Precon department, but a lot of times there's a really good strategy going out in the project management world, so we want to have them engaged and thinking about how we're going to build the building and how are we going to beat out our competition, how are we going to be smarter than everybody else, and that's really important. I mean, it goes without saying, right? We're numbers people. We are spreadsheet wonks. We love to, I joked the other day, somebody was giving me crap about setting up a spreadsheet, and I said, at my funeral, I will probably have a spreadsheet built that will be the program for the whole thing. It's what we do. And it really comes in helpful when you're in Destiny and you're doing dashboards. And if you haven't gotten to the point where you're figuring out dashboards and how they work, you're missing out. That's really super strong tool that Destiny has really helped us kind of taking our work to the next level. We're really excited about it. And you need somebody that knows spreadsheets really well to manipulate those. And then what I find, I think there are people that enjoy being a project manager. They enjoy kind of being in charge. The people that really do you well in Precon are the people that just love to build buildings, that really get energized in thinking about how can we do this? How can we make a building better? How can we, and it goes back to what Stuart says, it's really fun to know that, what we do affects people's lives, that we are, building hospitals, that we are building places of education, places of worship. It's really fun to be part of that fabric and to have people that enjoy that love that. It makes them love their work, right? They love what they do. They enjoy coming to work every day because they get another challenge that they get to solve. But also, just in general, to be able to rely on that and make them critical part of your team just is rewarding for everybody. Some closing thoughts. There are two types of leaders in the world. Those that lead from ahead, so that I'm out in front and I'm doing the work, and hey, follow me. And then there are those that lead from behind, and I'm the second. I like to lead from behind, which to me means I need to train my people. I need to support my people. I need to nudge my people. I need to give them critical feedback. I need to make them feel good about themselves. I need to make them feel energized. I need to defend them. I mean, there are times when people, oh, how did they miss that? Anybody should have seen that. They should have been able to do that. And then I remind them, well, you remember that we were pressed. The owner was screaming, I need to get to the bank. We need to finalize the GMP. We've got 24 hours to get it done. So there was no time to do that thing that you're about to take out on somebody else. Having their back is really important. Being somebody that leads from behind is the approach that I've taken in my career. No, I don't have little voices in my head, but listen to the voice in your head. The thing that I've found in almost every kind of major problem that we've had on projects that I've been involved with, I knew it before it happened. But I either thought, early in my career, I thought, well, they know more than me, I'll shut my mouth. Later in my career, it's a lot about the eagerness in the pursuit. A lot of times people will say, well, somebody's got to build the building. If you get to that point, make sure that it should be you, because maybe there isn't enough money in the budget. Or maybe that owner, we actually had an owner in a meeting one time say, all projects end up in a lawsuit. And we were dumb enough to actually build the building, and guess what? We ended up in a lawsuit. And I was actually in that meeting, failed to listen to that voice in my head because this was going to be an amazing project. And yeah, it was an amazing building. It was a terrible build. I mean, it was torturous. So listening to that voice in your head is really, really important. I've mentioned it many times. We're all in this together, having people's backs. One of the ways we do this at Findorff, and I've heard some mentions of pricing meetings, we call it a war room review. I've had to change my attitude about that. And once I did, and once I projected that to several others, the war room review, so at any milestone estimate before GMP leaves the door, before even an SD estimate on a sizable project, we bring the team into the war room. It'll be Executive Vice President of Operations, who's my boss, me, the pre-construction, whoever's running the project from that perspective, anybody of the team that has done estimates on it, and then the project management team, field leadership, whether it's the job superintendent or trade superintendents, and we all get in the room and we're going through the estimate, and we go through it in great detail. We start off, we just do this high level kind of, here's the project, and here's the strategy, and here's the site plan, and kind of just walk everybody through so they're all on the same page, because obviously not everybody in the room knows the project in and out like that. And then we go through our detailed self-perform estimating, and we go through it in severe, almost painful detail. And we talk about, okay, so the engineer drew this wall, and they've got a brick ledge on one side and a shelf edge for the slab on the other side, and then there's like this 3-inch gap that we're supposed to pour concrete through. How are we going to do that? And we will, first of all, if it's early in the process, now we've got a great opportunity to correct it, right? We could work with the engineer, we can work with the architect to fix those details. And if it's later in the project or it's a hard bid project, now we've got the ability to identify that as a challenge, as a risk, and start to assess, if it's in particular a hard bid job, what should our fee be to cover our risk? Or is that an opportunity? How can we do it smarter, still meet the intent of the documents? And if it's not, let's say it's a negotiated project, we're also identifying what level of contingency we're going to be willing to put on a project. That's really critical and part of what we do in the war room. But what we're really doing is we're all in the room together, and we're all making decisions together. And we're not going to come back 6 months from now when the job superintendent is saying, I need another crane. You don't want to give me one crane? I needed 2 cranes. Well, we were all in the room. We all determined that we needed 1 crane. Now, I'm not going to deny you if you tell me that you need a second crane. We better figure out how we're going to pay for it. But you can't come back to the Precon team. You can't come back to the estimator and say, you didn't give me what I needed, because we were all there together. And so changing the attitude of, come on in, we're going to grill you, estimator. and nitpick everything you've done wrong. It's not about that. It's not about that at all. It's about sharing that responsibility. And I think once people feel that and learn that, it really helps, A, the meeting run better, and B, it helps people not feel the stress level that they might have. So the next one it's going to say is don't fear change. It's inevitable. It's what's going to drive you forward. You need to embrace it. And I think I've given you a few examples, and one of the things I didn't point out, there was a slide really early on. There was a bunch of ironworkers that were up on a deck with a bunch of plastic balls. Does anybody know what that is? Yeah, it's another innovation thing that we've done a few times. It's called bubble deck or voided slabs, and it's almost like making a piece of precast but casting it in place. And so you're putting a bunch of air in the middle of the slab where the slab's not doing anything anyhow. It does really nice on really long span projects. So if you're interested, please let me know, because it is a really cool thing. But the idea of improving is always be looking for opportunities. Fail fast. I mean, give it a try. If it's not too expensive, give it a shot, see if it works. If it doesn't, move on. Or at least identify and say, it's not ready for prime time yet, but we need to keep our eye on that technology. We're there with AI, Johnny. We've got a license at Togo. We're experimenting with it. I mean, I haven't clicked the button and said, okay, do the estimate, but we're looking at it. And then finally, improve. You've got to improve. If you're not, it's kind of like growth. Your competition is growing, or improving. So if you're not improving, you're moving backwards. So you always got to be looking for ways to be better every day. It's what we got to do. So, thank you. If you have any questions, thank you.